Hey Arlo and Frank. Grandpa coming to you from Timaquan Preserve, Fort Carolyn National Monument. Fort Carolyn's a fort. Today I'm going to be reading from something called Classic Animal Tales. So a little different book this time. This is the Reader's Digest Young Families book. And today we're going to do city mouse and country mouse. So here's the country mouse kind of hanging out. Once upon a time, a country mouse named Oliver lived in a hole under the root of a big old oak tree. Oliver loved the sound of squirrels chattering during the day and crickets chirping at night. He loved the smell of rich dirt and hardy grass all around him. One day, Oliver invited his city cousin, Alistair, for a visit. Before Alistair arrived, Oliver tidied up his hole. He straightened his oak leaf bed. He spread fresh pine needles on the floor. He scrubbed the tuna can he used for a table and polished the bottle caps he used as plates. So this is pretty cool. Then Oliver sat by the entrance to his hole, gazed out at the stars, and waited for his cousin Alistair to arrive. So Alistair gets there, and here's the city mouse and the country mouse. When Alistair arrived, he set his fine leather suitcase on the rug of pine needles. "I say, cousin, is this your cellar?" he asked Oliver. "No," said Oliver, "it's my home." Oliver showed Alistair the back of the hole and the storeroom where he stored all of his grain. He led Alistair up onto the knob of the old oak root where he sometimes sat to watch the sunset. Then he sat Alistair down at the tuna can table and served him a fabulous dinner of barley corn and wheat germ. Alistair nibbled his meal politely. "This certainly tastes as though it's good for me," he coughed and swallowed. "A bit dry, perhaps. Could I bother you for a cup of tea?" Oliver brewed up a thimble of dandelion tea. When the thimble was empty, Oliver changed into his long johns, and Alistair changed into his silk pajamas, and the mice settled into their oak leaves for the night. Oliver awoke early the next morning as usual. A robin family twittered in the old oak tree. A rooster crowed at a nearby farm. Sounds like heaven to me. Probably not to Alistair. Alistair squeezed his pillow over his ears. "What is that confounded racket?" he mumbled. "That's the sound of morning in the country," said Oliver. "It's the wonderful music that makes me want to leap from my bed each morning and start the new day." And here's Oliver with his pillow over his head. Alistair pulled the pillow from his face and opened one eye. "You start your day in the morning?" he asked. "Good heaven, cousins, I usually don't rise till noon." "Here in the country, we rise at dawn," Oliver replied as he buttoned his overalls. Then he pulled on his work boots and pushed his wheelbarrow out into the morning sun. Alistair rolled to the edge of his oak leaf bed. He slid his feet into his shiny black dress shoes and followed his cousin outside. Oliver gathered acorns and stacked them near his hole. Alistair yawned and leaned against the root of the old oak tree. Oliver shucked the seeds from the tall ryegrass and carried them to the back of his hole where they would stay dry. Alistair wiped the dust from his shoes with his silk handkerchief. Oliver ventured into a nearby field to find fallen corn stalks. He dragged several of the stalks home and peeled off the husks. Oliver then rubbed the kernels of corn loose and one by one piled them neatly against the root of the old oak tree. There, Oliver rubbed his hands on his overalls. That's done. Thank goodness, Alistair collapsed into the wheelbarrow. Now that we've finished the work, I'd say it's time for a bit of a snack and a nap, wouldn't you? What do you think's going to happen here? So, and here they are. It looks like they're getting ready to go off someplace. Hopefully you can see this okay. Oliver giggled. The work isn't finished. We still have to carry in water and hack out that root that is growing down into my kitchen. And winter is coming, don't forget. Time to gather up rags and bits of grass to keep the hole snug and warm. Alistair sighed. I'm simply not cut out for country life, he said. You work too hard for your dinner, and all you end up with is a pile of bird seed. A mouse could starve to death out here. Come home with me for a while. I'll show you the good life. Alistair packed his silk pajamas into his fine leather suitcase. Oliver packed his long johns into his beat-up carpet bag. Two mice set out for Alistair's home in the city, and that was them in that picture. Walking, I guess they can't catch the train. They can't get up the steps. Oliver followed Alistair over fields and valleys into subway tunnels and through crowded city streets until they reached the luxury hotel where Alistair lived. Alistair stopped in front of the door. Polished marble floors and shiny brass knobs, he said. This is how mice are supposed to live. Oliver stared up at the revolving glass door. How do we get inside, Alistair? Wait till the opening comes around, then run through as fast as you can, Alistair replied. The door swung around and Alistair quickly disappeared inside. And here they are, I guess, in Alistair's little apartment, his penthouse apartment. Sure, he lives in a hole too. It's just a hole in a better place. Oliver took a deep breath. He saw an opening and dove inside. He tried to run through like Alistair had said, but his carpet bag was caught on the edge of the door. Oliver went round and round. He spun so many times he couldn't tell whether he was right side up or upside down. Oliver whirled and whirled and might still be whirling to this very day if Alistair hadn't leapt up, tugged the bag free, and dragged his dizzy friend inside. Oliver sat on the marble floor to catch his breath. Then he followed Alistair across the lobby and through a small crack in the wall hidden by velvet draperies. My apartment, Alistair said when they were inside. Oliver looked around in amazement. Alistair's home was filled with gold candlesticks, crystal goblets, and linen napkins embroidered with the hotel's name. We're under the bandstand, Alistair pointed out the hole that was his front door. An orchestra plays and ladies and gentlemen dance every night until dawn. How can you keep up with all that noise? Asked Oliver. Or how can you sleep with all that noise? Asked Oliver. Sleep, said Alistair. I can sleep during the day. We do things a little differently here. Dinner, for example, at a 5-star hotel. Dinner begins with hors d'oeuvres. And here's the two mice doing their thing. Chowing down on their hors d'oeuvres. Alistair led Oliver through the dining room. They hid behind potted plants and raced under tablecloths. They waited until the chef went to check something in the dining room, then scampered across the kitchen and into the pantry. The pantry was dark. Oliver stumbled. Something skidded across the pantry and thwacked. "Do be careful," said Alistair. He opened the pantry door and cracked. In the dim light, Oliver could barely see what he'd stumbled over. It's oh my. A mouse trap. Alistair scooted it under the shelf with his paw. "You'll learn to stay away from them." Alistair led Oliver up the shelves to the hors d'oeuvres. Alistair gobbled fancy crackers, nibbled pasta, and even managed to chew a hole in a tin of smoked salmon. Some nasty mice. This mouse can chew through metal. "Now this," said Alistair, patting his tummy, "is fine dining." Oliver was still so frightened that he barely ate a crumb. "Tonight, the chef is preparing roast duckling with herb potatoes in a delicate cream sauce." Alistair's mouth watered. His whiskers twitched. "One taste, and you'll never go back to the country." The mice crept out of the pantry. The kitchen was empty. They scurried under the chef's work table. And here they are on the old work table. "Our chef is quite a messy fellow," said Alistair. "He drops chunks of meat and potatoes and dollops of sauce all over the floor. One evening I found an entire turkey drumstick lying under the stove." Alistair darted about, gathering up bits of duckling and potatoes. He didn't notice the chef marching back into the kitchen. But the chef noticed Alistair. "You again," shouted the chef. "And this time you've brought a friend. Furry little pests. I will not have you in my 5-star kitchen." The chef grabbed the broom and chased the mice round and round the sink, round and round the kitchen. Alistair and Oliver escaped through a hole under the sink. "No main course tonight, I'm afraid," said Alistair. "But don't worry, cousin. We'll make up for it with dessert." Alistair led Oliver around the water pipes and through the walls. They squeezed through a gap in the baseboard, and Oliver still found himself in the enormous kitchen, but this time he was directly beneath the pastry cart. The chef thought the two mice had escaped him, and he gave up his search. Alistair showed Oliver the tarts and turnovers and cheesecakes. He demonstrated how to flick bits of meringue off a pie with his tail. And I'm glad that your grandmother isn't reading this book to you. I wouldn't want to eat at this restaurant. If this restaurant was in modern days, it would be shut down. Oliver timidly nibbled the edge of a flaky cream puff. It was the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. He leaned forward to get a bigger bite, and splat. The cart lurched forward, and that's what we were seeing. The cart was lurching forward. Oliver landed face down in the cream puff. Alistair grabbed the edge of a lacy napkin and hung on tight as a waiter wheeled the cart across the dining room. He's wheeling these mice out to the customers. The cart clanked to a stop near Alistair's apartment. The waiter snatched up 3 plates of cherry cheesecake and bustled away. Oliver wobbled off the cart and sank down into the plush carpet to catch his breath. "I'm not cut out for the life in the city," he said. "You take too many risks for your dinner. A mouse could starve to death here, too. There is plenty of delicious food, but I'm too frightened to eat any of it. I'm going home to the good life." And I don't blame Oliver. I'm an Oliver guy, not an Alistair guy. So Oliver dragged his carpet bag down through crowded city streets, into subway tunnels, and over fields and valleys until he reached his hole under the root of the big old oak tree. He ate a late supper of acorns and wheat kernels, then curled up in his oak leaf bed. He could hear the crickets chirping, and he could see the fireflies flickering. Back at his hotel, Alistair licked meringue from his whiskers and curled up in his linen napkin. He listened to the orchestra and watched all the glistening gowns as couples twirled by on the dance floor. Both mice sighed at the very same time. "I love being home," they said, and slowly drifted off to sleep. And here's Oliver showing up at his house. Pretty big key. I don't know where he keeps that key, but I don't think his pockets are that big. Okay, guys. That was a pretty weird one. As I say, I'm glad grandmother wasn't reading that to you, because she would have kept going, "That's nasty." Peace out.